What's happening, y'all? Welcome to a live episode of the Coast to Coast podcast. I'm Joey Powell. We're glad you're here. Sean Moran and Sherrell McMillan are also here. I'm glad they're here, and I'm glad you, our listener/viewer, are here. If you're joining us live, thanks for making us a part of your evening. If you're watching us later on YouTube, or if you're listening to us on a podcast later on, either way, we're glad you're here. We're glad that we're a part of your podcast consumption and your following of UNC basketball. We are your favorite podcast. And of course, we're brought to you by Johnny T-shirt. All right, fellas. Happy to be here. Happy to be back in the saddle. Love doing a live show with you. And for those of you who are in the chat, I'll go ahead and let you know now. Get some good questions in here. We will try to do our best to answer them. And why don't we get started with the news that broke this past week? North Carolina has released their non-conference basketball schedule. And so I'm going to go ahead and dive into that and let you guys be ruminating a little bit about what you think this schedule looks like, what your personal opinions of it are. But I'm going to breeze through it, and then I'll get you two fellas to give me a little bit of insight and kind of what your initial reactions are from it. So October 29th versus Winston-Salem State in an exhibition. It also, UNC has announced they are going out to play BYU in an exhibition as well. That is earlier in October. But then we get to the real games. November the 3rd at home, Central Arkansas. November 7th, home return game versus Kansas. November 11th, home versus Radford. November 14th, home versus North Carolina Central. November 18th, home versus Navy. November 25th, at Fort Myers, Florida, in the Skechers Doc Martin boots, Fort Myers tip-off for the Cure Michael Scott race 5K, whatever you want to call it. They will be playing St. Bonaventure first, and then that's St. Bonaventure. Isn't that the fighting, what's his name that used to be with ESPN? I can't remember his name. It'll come to me in a minute. And then they'll play Michigan State in that same multi-team event. December 2nd in the SEC-ACC Challenge at Kentucky. And then they're home December 7th against Georgetown, home against USC Upstate, home against East Tennessee State University, in Atlanta on December the 20th against Ohio State in the CBS Sports Classic, and then home against ECU on December the 22nd. So, fellas, first thing I'm going to come to you, Sean. I'll let you start. The biggest thing that jumps out at me is that's a lot of home games early on. And there's really only seemingly 3 teams that will probably be ranked as the season starts there in Kansas, Michigan State, and then potentially Ohio State, I think, is probably in there. And okay, so maybe 3.5, Kentucky. So, Sean, coming to you first, man. What are your knee-jerk reactions after hearing that non-conference schedule?
From a positive perspective, the fact that they do have a decent amount of home games to figure out their lineups, figure out all the different players coming in and what the strengths and weaknesses are together in live action. But when looking at the opponents, to me, it brings deja vu over really the last few years. There's a lot of pressure on that second game against Kansas to get a win early on and to get that quad one win. Because then if you lose that, you have at Kentucky, which is going to be tough no matter what. And then you have 2 Big Ten teams, which could be quad one wins. So those are important and 2 very winnable games. But you drop 1 or 2 of those, and then we're having that Q1 discussion throughout the year, which we've had. And you have the 2 Duke games and Louis, but now you're back depending on the ACC and how strong they are. So with that, I think there's a lot of pressure to win at home against Kansas, not just because UNC hasn't beaten them since pre-Roy Williams, but to get a quad one win and to just kind of put something strong on the resume early on.
Sherrell, over to you. Same thing, man.
I think Roy Williams was the coach the last time Carolina beat Kansas. Matt Doherty's, I guess, his 3rd and final year. I believe they opened up the season with a win over Kansas in the preseason NIT. So there's that. I kind of like the schedule. I think they are really trying to help the team. They're trying to help the head coach, trying to help the team because, frankly, the last few years haven't gone the best. They've kind of been under the 8 ball as soon as the season started. So I think 5 home games over the course of about 15 days in November is a welcome sign for them. It does put a ton of pressure on the Kansas game, like you said, Sean, but it's at home, and that's one that you got to think, the crowd needs to be worth for 5-6 points to help kind of push them over. Because if they're able to get through that, there's a stretch of winnable games where they could really build some momentum. And I think the last few years, they haven't had a chance to really build any momentum. It's like they win a game, they go lose to Kansas, they play a couple of not great teams, and then they're off to Maui, where they have to play two top 5, two top 10 teams. So at least, even if they lose to Kansas, there's a chance for them to kind of take a step back, take a deep breath, and then kind of keep moving forward. So I like that aspect of it. And I know people will say, and I'm not saying they're wrong, that this is Carolina and that, the schedule might be a little soft. Well, this is, I think, Carolina catching up to where it is now. It's not where it hopes to be, but it is where it is now. And I think this schedule is reflective of kind of the state of the program. And I think the hope is that year by year, that'll get better. But right now, I think it's a good schedule for who they are.
So we've already had a question in the chat from Chief Cooney about the roster and summer pickup games. And as you all know, Inside Carolina has sources beyond anybody else with some kind of inside information about some of these current roster via alumni games. So I'll give you a little bit of backstory. If you're not a premium subscriber, go ahead and make that happen, and you can see the rundowns that we've got from our sources about those games. I think the first thing I would say before I throw this over to Sean for his kind of gleanings from those first couple of games, all of the caveats apply here, to steal a Sherrell McMillan phrase. Make sure that you're not reading too much in to these summertime pickups. I think it's good to get a sense of how the team is gelling together, but I'm probably going to give a little bit of side eye and some judgment to anybody who's reading too much into stats from, again, another Sherrellism, micro snapshots of what's going on with this squad. So bear with us. But Chief Cooney, good question. I'll go to Sean first. Sean, after seeing what we've known about the first couple of pickup games, and UNC's done fairly well sharing some stuff on social media where you can see some practice clips and whatnot. Is there anything that's jumping kind of off the screen at you about these guys and how they seem to be starting to gel together? Because I'll go ahead and tell you guys, one of my favorite quotes, I think, for the coming year is going to be that talent does not equal cohesion. So I'm going to share this to you, Sean, and see how you feel about what you've seen or what you've been able to learn about this team so far this summer.
Well, first, I've not been able to watch the video that has gone up on YouTube that I think had some of it might have been the second pickup game. But I would say, just from the detail that Inside Carolina put on from a positive perspective, first and foremost, Cam Johnson playing. I think huge shout out to Cam, and I was listening to a podcast where he was talking about, I think Luke May was out in Phoenix with him, so one knew that they were still close and hanging out, and my head was like, man, it'd be great if those guys were coming back and playing. And then I read about him playing in the second one, so shout out to him for playing. Top NBA guy coming back. Ideally, would love to see Kobe and Cole and some of the other guys playing with him going forward, but appreciated him playing, and Justin Jackson suiting up as well. In terms of the current players, I think the positive, Jonathan Powell, just from his what we've been able to read about him, I think we've talked about on the podcast, where he's only been a freshman and he started, I think, showcased his 3-point shooting ability, but I think there is a little bit more to his game, especially that freshman to sophomore year jump. So I think he's showcasing that whether he's starting or playing significant minutes off the bench, can definitely be a threat and do it more so just from a shooting perspective. Other Caleb Wilson playing, making his mark early on, and I think that's exciting, knowing that, hey, UNC does have this top 5, top 10 freshman talent. Is he going to be one of those guys that gets drafted high from the NBA but doesn't have that production as a freshman, or is he able to turn some of that potential into production? And it's looking like he's been doing a lot of work on his game to turn that into production. And then final thing, Seth Trimble, Strong game, attacking. I think showcasing some of that senior leadership that we've been hoping for. I would say from a concern / question mark, I think Kai and Evans. First game, Cormac Ryan giving him some trouble. Second game, not scoring. I think that to me is a little concerning. The big question to me is, can he touch the paint at all, or is he just going to be somebody that can handle the ball, bringing it up, similar to Colorado State, has to give it up pretty quickly, and then now he's operating more as a two guard and looking for an open shot. So those were just probably some initial thoughts around the games that I was reading through, and looking forward to hearing Sherrell and some of your comments.
All right, Sherrell, you're up, man.
Can you hear me okay? Does this sound good? My audio better?
It doesn't sound good, but I can hear you.
Okay. All right. We'll work on this. I thought we had fixed it, but we will work on it and we'll try again tomorrow. No, the main thing for me is just like the most basic information from these games is like, is Henry Vasar actually 7 foot? Like, check. He looks like he's 7 foot. Is Caleb Wilson actually 6'9"? Like, check. He looks like he's 6'9". Does Caleb Wilson always play hard like we've seen him do most of the time over the last couple of years? Correct. Like, he's done that. So that's what I try to look for as far as like the game itself. I mean, some people can take things from it if they want, but for me, it's more about confirming that kind of basic information because you can kind of tell where the warning signs might come from. I do think it's indicative of like keeping track of who did what, because you can get a full story once the entire summer is over. Like, it was last year this time we started hearing like, hey man, they might be in trouble, in the middle. Like Lubin is really 6'6.5" or 6'5.5" or whatever he is. You start hearing that kind of stuff. You start hearing like, oh, I don't know if Jalen Washington is going to be able to rebound the way that they need to, especially with Armando Bacot being gone. You start hearing that kind of stuff, and then it played out as you keep talking to people throughout the summer. So it's a little for me of just like the first piece, like you said, Joey, the kind of snapshot, and then you use that moving forward for the entire summer to try to draw some conclusions. Like Jonathan Powell, I think, is one to watch. Like we got a text today talking about like they actually like, hey man, that might have a steal with Jonathan Powell, and they think he can play in the NBA. So that's just one person's opinion from watching a few games. But if that continues throughout the summer, then maybe it's something to watch. Last summer, everyone to a man said, man, Seth Trimble's having a great offseason. And you saw that when the season started. It didn't carry over throughout the entire season, but it was a data point that you went from the first pickup game from people who were reporting back all the way to the end of the summer. So that's what I'm looking for. So now I kind of have like the plot, so to speak, on the map of like, okay, this person through 2 games based on reports is looking like this. Let's see how it is in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a month.
That, I think, is probably stuff that people can live and wrestle with. And before we get into the questions from everybody, let's touch on something that happened this past week also. And Sean, I'll get into, not that anybody is dying to hear them, but I'll give you some of my takeaways from some of the scrimmage footage in a little bit. But we did have an NBA draft this past week, and for those who were shocked about Drake Powell getting drafted, you did see that he was taken and then traded to Brooklyn. I'm going to give Sherrell and Sean some props here because those two guys might have actually said on this show a while back that Brooklyn would have been a great landing spot for him. So I want to make sure they get the flowers as possible. But yeah, Drake Powell, even playing the limited minutes he did last year, clearly he worked out really well and interviewed really well, because when you're getting drafted in the first round, that means some teams are willing to commit a lot of money and resources to you. So Sherrell, I'll come to you first. How do you feel about where Drake landed? How do you feel about it? Do you feel like that's a pretty good spot for him to be picked at? And then what do you anticipate his trajectory looking like over the next year or two?
For sure. And even before they had accumulated 5 first-round picks, back when they only had 2, I think it was a while ago, Brooklyn was one of the teams that we had heard was really interested in Drake and been doing homework on him really since the CP3 camp last August. So I I think we mentioned it one time on the podcast. The two teams that we had heard had done a ton of homework on him were Brooklyn and Oklahoma City. And they had been to Carolina practices. They had been to Carolina games. They had seen him, obviously, in AAU. They were tracking him at the elite skills camps. Anywhere he was at, those two teams we had heard about for a while. So I think they followed through on their scouting, especially Brooklyn, when they had an opportunity to get him. I like the fact that he's going to a team that's not great. I do wonder, though, they've got a lot of pieces on that team, and it don't exactly fit. So I'm not sure what the plan is. Cam Thomas is there, Cam Johnson is there, and then there's probably 4 or 5 other kind of wings on the team who are young, cheap, and just trying to, get minutes and learn how to play in the NBA. So I like the spot. I like the opportunity to play on a bad team, so he doesn't get sent to the G League and gets minutes. But, with the way the draft played out, I didn't think Brooklyn was going to take 5 guys in the first round. I don't think anybody did. And so it kind of makes you wonder what their plan is. But hopefully he's in their plans as like someone who's actually going to play and going to get minutes. And maybe some of the guys they're going to trade or let go. So there's a path to playing time for him. But overall, getting drafted there after all the mocks had him in the 30s, I think it's a service to his agent and his family that they, and him himself, that, they knew and trusted the work that he had put in and how well he did in individual workouts and interviews, that he was going to get picked where he did.
Sean, I'll come to you and actually kind of pivot a little bit. RJ Davis signing with the Lakers, and folks might see that and kind of question a little bit. He signed immediately, right after the draft was over, which makes me think they had some eyes on him and had done a lot of homework on him as well. Tell me a little bit what you think about RJ and potentially trying to find a home in LA and getting a chance with their summer league team, and what you expect his trajectory to look like.
Well, personally, I'm excited about that because I can hopefully get to see him in person out here in LA. And with his Exhibit 10, he'll be playing on their summer league team. We'll be at camp, most likely start the year on the South Bay Lakers, the G League team. So we'll probably be going to my first South Bay Lakers basketball game. But I think for him and in general, right, the teams have their draft picks, and then they're going to focus on who are their 1 or 2 two-way guys, and then try to slot in those Exhibit 10 guys. But I think it's a good opportunity for him. Obviously the super senior had a nice payday in that 5th year, and now has to kind of go work his way up. I think we know the challenges that will exist just from his height. But I think with his skill level, he'll give himself a chance. And I think going to the Lakers is a good opportunity for him to earn it, which he will have to do playing well in summer league and G League. So it's not going to be something you snap your fingers and RJ is all of a sudden playing for the Lakers unless there's a slate of injuries. But I do think it's a good organization to go to and learn, and ideally try to showcase what he can do and maybe some of the stuff that he wasn't asked as much to do from a playmaking perspective over the last years. So to me, I think it's a good landing spot for him and an opportunity to prove himself, to a lot of people.
While I've got you, what are your takeaways on that team being sold? Do you have any initial gut reactions about how that might change things in the future, or just you want to just let that fly?
I mean, it's a hefty number, and I think probably with the minority investment, not a huge surprise, but I think it'll just go more from the team and how they're going from that family organization to probably one of the better run organizations over the few years. Hopefully, if they start winning championships, it'll be after LeBron goes from them. But I think it'll only help the organization in the long run.
Well, I appreciate that, fellas. Another thing from draft, I don't know if anybody missed it. Easy for me to say. I'm not sure if anyone missed this, but another lottery pick from this past week's draft, which I don't think anybody saw coming, was one Johnny T-shirt. Johnny T-shirt was taken in the lottery. I think most folks that were familiar with Johnny's game knew that that's elite level talent. but I don't think anybody expected him to climb up the boards the way he did. And when you think about Johnny T-shirts, selection, prices, just customer service, friendliness, general overall, human skill in working with its customer and buying public, you knew that it was going to be a lottery pick. We love Johnny T-shirt here on the show. They're big supporters of Inside Carolina and has done so much for IC and supporting our content. There's a Kentucky fan in our chat right now, and they don't have a Johnny T-shirt. I mean, even if they did have a Johnny T-shirt, they probably put him in the lottery and still not win any championships with him. So Johnny T-shirt, big proponent of this year's show, big supporter of IC. We love Johnny T-shirt. JohnnyT-shirt.com. Check them out. We want to make sure that you are able to benefit from their great prices. If you're a premium subscriber, if you have that code from the message boards, make sure you use it. Get 10% off of your already amazing prices. I got some Johnny T-shirt socks for Father's Day. Pretty awesome. Came from Johnny T. Loved it. Johnny T-shirt, we love them. We want you guys to love them as much too. We'll be right back. If you're listening to this in podcast form, there'll be some national ads that drop in here for a second. And we're going to come back and take your questions. That's right. Yours, you, the listening audience that's here live with us tonight as we record this. You're listening to the Coast to Coast podcast on InsideCarolina.com. All right, I'm Joey Powell, Coast to Coast, brought to you by Johnny T-shirt. We're glad that you're here. We're glad that you guys are being a part of this show. We're glad we're a part of your podcast consumption habits. So doing a live show tonight, figured we'd take some of the better questions that we get from folks. We did get some on the message boards as well today, so I'll take a couple of those. First question, this is what everybody wants to know. I'm going to let Sherrell address this. Everybody asks 1,000 times a week. I know it's important. I know it's on people's mind. I'm not judging anybody for asking, but I want to assure you, as soon as there is news to break about Luka Bogavac and his matriculation to Chapel Hill, that you will see that on Inside Carolina. Sherrell is all over it. And Sherrell, go ahead and give us an update now that there is essentially no update, that the process is still going, but I want to make sure everybody knows we're going to address it while we've got you live. So fire away, bro.
I do apologize for my microphone issues. So if you can't hear me, sorry, we will get it fixed next week. I think.
Hey man, you sound crystal as a mountain spring right now. So you're good. You've got it fixed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I hope so. So right now, the biggest thing is, again, it's threefold. It is UNC admissions. It is the visa situation with the federal government, and then is the NCAA. And so the first one, obviously, is UNC admissions. You can't play for UNC if he's not admitted to the school. I know some feel that is antiquated, but that is still kind of how things work. There is, I would say, positivity from folks we're talking to that will eventually happen. As far as a timeline, we don't know. Could speculate, but it's just unclear at this moment. So that is the first step. And then again, after that is the student visa situation. And then after that is the NCAA. Now, there are plenty of players from the ABA, the league he played in, from that part of the world, who have gotten clearance, who played pro, and then ended up getting NCAA approval to play. There are several coming over this year from that same league who I think are expecting to be able to be cleared by the NCAA. I'm unaware of any of them actually being cleared just yet. That usually comes later on in the year. So just getting through the first step, which is UNC admissions, and then moving forward from there. But overall, it's going to be, let's put it this way. Again, getting through UNC admissions is the first step. And once you do that, then we can move on to the second one. I think the NCAA understands the landscape in which it is operating right now, which is one that is very heavy with litigation. And so it would be surprising to me if a lot of these guys, considering the money the schools are putting forth, that the NCAA didn't take that into account and just make these guys eligible. Now, I can't speak for them. The NCAA is the ultimate wild card, especially when it is grasping for power in its probably, dying hours. But you would expect that eventually these guys will be cleared. So that leaves the visa situation with the federal government, which again is another wild card, and UNC admissions. So that's where things stand. And If we find out something, we'll let you know. But I know there's movement behind the scenes. Everybody's on the same page and working to get him over as soon as possible.
We certainly do appreciate that, Mr. McMillan, with his update on Luka Bogavac. Bogavac. Very nice player there from Montenegro. Montenegro. That's fun to say, like pantalones. All right, Sean, we'll start throwing you some questions here. We've got a bunch of actually really good ones from the from both the message boards and our friends in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and hit you with the first one. This is a really good question from Wilmy Wood Heel on the boards, and you mentioned, we've talked about the scrimmage games and pickup during the summer. Sean, how do you anticipate the front court pieces fitting together and how Hubert Davis might deploy them on offense? Obviously, North Carolina has a bunch of versatile guys, but there's not really somebody that you would see and say, oh, that's a banger, right? That's a guy that's going to be anchors in the paint. It's going, I keep going back to Armando Bacot, but he's the last really, really good one that they've had. So I would ask you, do you see any sorts of schemes or past team strategies that you think North Carolina might be able to work in? And again, shout out to Wilmy Wood Heel on the board for putting that out there.
So from the front court perspective, you have Vasar and Caleb Wilson in terms of the four or five, which you can pretty much pencil into the starting lineup. And both of those guys would prefer to be on the perimeter, but I think you had Vasar, who was a strong offensive rebounder, good length, and then coming off the bench, probably Stevenson and Zayden High. So Zayden High is probably the most aggressive rebounder out of that group, both offensively and defensively, just from going back to his AAU time. So it's going to be better than last year, but in terms of that offensive rebounding being a top 5 team that we grew so accustomed to, I don't see that. But I do see with the height and the length, some ability to control the boards a little bit better, and from offensive rebounding perspective, hopefully an increased emphasis on that. But in terms of style offensively, I think we've talked about it several times, really looking at utilizing Vasar's skill level and getting him outside of the paint to almost, whether it's trying to attack off the dribble, popping for three, or using some of his vision. And then you have Wilson just trying to get him on the move, get him attacking. Teams will be trying to play off of him. So whether it's 5 out or utilizing those guys to put the ball in their hands and make plays, I think will be important. But for the most part, you're not going to have that, oversized guy that you can throw in the post, and now a team's got to double him. But I do think Zayden High could be an interesting piece, just knowing that, hey, realistically, from an age perspective, he could be going into his junior year, and the fact that from an offensive rebound perspective, he has been one to prove it, knowing that I think he does have that aggressiveness in him, no matter what the style is, to attack the glass.
Sherrell, next question, and this has actually been asked by 2 folks. So I'm going to hit you with a 25-26 question, and I'm going to hit you with a 26 question. TCP 23 UNC on the board says, can you share any info on how or if UNC will use its remaining scholarships for this year? And then when you answer that one, I'll follow up with the question about 26.
Yeah, the last thing we had heard from multiple people was that they were looking at kind of developmental guys. Now, if there's someone who's better than a developmental guy who is willing to come, let's call it at a severely reduced rate, then I think they would take that. But with what they're operating with now, you're thinking mostly developmental guys who would be on scholarship. And they are at 12 scholarships now, I believe, which leaves 3 more. I'm not sure because some players were grandfathered in with the house settlement. So there could be, more than 15 players on the roster, even though the house settlement says there can only be 15 scholarships and no walk-ons. So there could be a situation where there are additional players who are on the team past the 15 scholarship limit if they're grandfathered in. I'm just not exactly sure how that's working or being accounted for. But yeah, the developmental guys who come in who aren't expecting to play a ton, who at best would be backup players, who would be happy to be at UNC. And then if they can develop and, get better as the years go on, provide some continuity for the team, then maybe they can ascend over the next couple of years. So just almost like flyers on guys, essentially, is what they're talking about now. There's no guarantee that it gets done because it could be a situation where they don't find anyone who's the perfect fit or anyone who's willing to come, for a scholarship. But they're still looking and they're going to look. And again, last year, the last 2 years, they've added players in July and August. So still a lot of time to come. There are guys who have waivers out there who are trying to get extra years, guys who redshirted and are trying to convert those years into COVID. There's all kinds of stuff happening, and who knows what's going to happen with additional legislation. So keeping their options open. You don't want to have all 15 scholarships filled already because you never know what could happen. Somebody could get fired. Somebody could get let out of their letter of intent. All the things we always talk about. So they've got their core group where they're maintaining flexibility with those 3 scholarships, but looking for developmental guys off the bench.
Appreciate that, man. Something I would also mention is we have not talked about the house settlement on this show, and it did happen since we were last with you. I would point to Tommy and Greg's Next Level show about that. Greg has done just an amazing deep dive about what that house settlement means. I'm sorry, the settlement of the house case, what that means for North Carolina, how that changes funding, how that changes scholarship limits, how the payouts of that are going to be handled amongst North Carolina's athletic department. So I would just refer everybody to the articles that Greg wrote and then the show that he and Tommy did on Next Level. Really, really good stuff. And Greg and Tommy spent a great deal of time on that, laying it out much better than I feel comfortable about kind of entering into on this show. All right, Sherrell, the backup question that I promised you, UNC Hoopster fan, another handle on the IC Premium message boards. Can you please talk about recruiting needs in 26? How big of a class will North Carolina take from high school and what positions? And I think Hoopster fans probably feeling the same thing that we're all seeing now, and just how differently UNC is approaching high school recruiting nowadays, considering the way the transfer portal works and guys coming from Europe, et cetera, et cetera. I think you guys did a good job of laying out what the coaches were looking at when they were doing the AAU circuit earlier this summer. But Sherrell, you want to dive into that? What you think North Carolina's, at least the early read on what they might do with 26s?
Yeah, the days of the 5-man, 6-man high school class are likely over because you can take that money from the three of the guys from high school and give it to someone who's played for 2 or 3 or 4 seasons in college, who's already developed, been through a weightlifting program, got good coaching, et cetera, et cetera. So you're talking about more than likely a 4-man class at tops. And that's if they absolutely love the players or somebody's willing to come at a discount or something like that. I think from what you've seen, they're obviously looking to add, a guard, at least one. You just don't know because things are so year to year. But if you look at the depth chart, Kyan Evans could come back to UNC for another year. Seth Trimble will be out of eligibility. More than likely, I think Luka Bogavac more than likely will only get, I don't want to say that. There's a chance he could only get 1 season because he's been a professional for so long. So you can't count on having him for a second season if he materializes at Carolina. So there's going to need to be some additional help in the backcourt, even with the likelihood of Dennis and Dixon both coming back. So that's one place. And then on the wing as well, because again, Jonathan Powell can come back if he chooses, but after that, there's not a lot on the wing coming back for UNC, especially if Bogavac only has the 1 year. So, and then the likelihood is that Caleb Wilson will be a one and done player. So you're probably looking at a combo forward as well. So if you had to handicap, you're looking at more than likely for UNC at minimum, a combo forward, a wing, and some kind of, whether it be, I think they're indifferent about whether it's a traditional lead guard or a combo guard based upon the offers that they have. But a guard, a wing, and a combo forward looks to be kind of where they're headed. But of course, if Henry Vasar has a great year, then you add center as well. But I think that would likely come from the portal because it's very hard, unless you're a special player, to come in and be a dominant, impactful center as a freshman in this age of college basketball.
I mean, in any age of college basketball, unless you're talking about like the Tim Duncans of the world. Go ahead, Sean.
I was just gonna say, looking at our revised 2026 depth chart in terms of how they've been broken out, I think out of the guys that have been offered, you only have 4 or 5 that are watch candidates or focuses. And in terms of visits, Sherrell can correct me, but Tony Bryant being that kind of, I'd say more 4 or 5 type of player, but athletic forward, and then Deron Rippey. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but in terms of him being that point guard ball handler, as at least 2 guys that are set to come on campus. But I think it'll be interesting to see really over July into August what those focuses are, then how they try to set up their September. No different than last year with the visits.
Sean,
Joey, let me jump in. Last year, if you start to look at it, the guys I think who they felt the best about, they had visit early, and then kind of pitch things in from there. Because there was I think 5 straight weekends where they had people on campus. And I don't think it's a coincidence that they have, you can call him Ron. That's what everybody around him calls him. So Ron Rippey and Bryant, it's no coincidence they're both coming for that opening weekend. And their visits aren't the traditional Friday through Sunday. Because UNC football plays on Labor Day night, they're coming in on Sunday, staying for the game on Monday, and then leaving Tuesday. So they are definitely loading that weekend up. And from what I can gather, I think a lot of coaches probably will. Olympic sports, women's basketball, baseball, everybody is probably going to load up that weekend with visitors, and because it's going to be quite a show, quite the production. So the fact that those are the 2 they want there that weekend, I think says a lot.
Yeah, shout out to the folks in the athletic department that are in charge of transportation for recruits that weekend, because that is going to be, especially with it being a holiday weekend, man, is going to be a zoo amongst zoos. Sean, another little bit of a roster question, and I'll go ahead and drop this up on the screen there. Ryan from the 910 in the chat, how do you foresee the backup center position playing out between Zayden and Jaren? I don't think James Brown will play meaningful minutes. I know you touched on that a little bit when you were kind of talking about strategies and how to utilize the post, but I would ask you, Sean, what do you see that kind of 5B being for North Carolina when they get that rotation going?
Great question, and one that I think those exhibitions and that first game will lead into how they're going to play Kansas. But I think the good thing is that you ideally have 4 players, for the 4 or 5 spots, where I think the 2 are locked in. I think there is going to be some question, to what Sherrell was talking about, of as long as Luka does make it to campus, of keeping Jaren in that 4 spot versus having him as that 3. But I think if he's in that 4-5, you have 2 guys that bring different skill sets, where Zayden High, I think, could be more comfortable in that true backup center position, where Jaren Stevenson, I think, more comfortable in that backup 4 spot. Because I think what Zayden can bring, he got very little time as a freshman last year, was working out on his own, so it's still going to take some time developmentally, versus Stevenson, who's had 2 years as a maybe not full-time starter, but started a lot for Alabama. Zayden's going to be a better crasher, I think, more aggressive. Jaren, really interesting case. Could probably spend 10 minutes on him. Hopefully we'll have a video report on him, both offensively and defensively. But I think the question for me is, and really not less of a question, but more a focus point in July and August, is what is he doing to improve himself from a strength and conditioning perspective, especially just trying to add a little bit more explosiveness. And then is there one skill set that he can definitely bring to the table? I think in Alabama, offensively, he was caught standing in the corner, shot respectable from 3, had his games, but I think more often than not, as we saw when UNC played him, you could put RJ Davis on him and he's not going to try to punish undersized guys in the post. So offensively, what is he going to bring besides just running well up and down the court? And then defensively, Alabama did use him a lot to chase around the guards or wings. And I think in certain spot situations, that size can throw people for a loop. But once you do it more than once, I thought it was pretty easy to run them through some screens or blow by him once you get the ball on the perimeter. So if he can guard the 4s, I think 5s he's not physically ready to guard yet. Whereas Zayden High I think is a little stronger. So a little wordy, but we'll throw it back to you guys for some other thoughts.
On the Stevenson front, I think with him, it's going to be about aggression and motor, and Joey's favorite phrase in the whole wide world, Tommy Ashley's as well, dog. He's going to have to be more aggressive. He's going to have to punish people because of his size and his ability. And that's been, frankly, a question mark on him since really his sophomore year in high school, is that he's got the physical traits you want in like the prototypical 4, but like, does he want it? Like, does he breathe it? Does he need it? You know what I'm saying? And whether that's fair or not, I'll let other people be the judge, but I think that is a question that is out there and one he's going to have to answer. And with this particular team, one thing in looking through numbers and stuff, just of the players and just trying to get a feel, don't want to do too many deep dives in the middle of June, or late June, early July, since there's so much time before the season starts. But I know we all think that because the team is bigger, that rebounding is going to be just better, just because they're bigger. And maybe there's something to that. But I don't know how many instinctual natural rebounders there are in a team outside of Caleb Wilson. I think for Vasar, he's still got to prove it. We all think he has a very high ceiling, but he's got to prove it that he can do it as the guy and not just one of the guys full time at UNC. So there's that. And Stevenson he hasn't proven he can be that kind of tough physical rebounder consistently. He'll show it at times, as I think Sean's videos will kind of highlight. But he hasn't been able to do it over and over and over. And then that leaves James Brown and Zayden High. And, I think Brown is still a little bit of an unknown. We'll see what happens when practice and everything starts. But there's one thing about Zayden High on the court that you like. It's that he's always been aggressive. He's always gone out the rebounds. He's always kind of throwing his body into the fray to try and be physical. And with a team like this, where there's a lot of skill, if you can show yourself as someone who is a dog, as Joy loves, and I like to point out that Joy loves so much every single time. If you can show that, then I think there's going to be a path to playing time for you, because they're going to need, I hate to say this, they're going to need a goon. They're going to need somebody, Oakley, an enforcer, someone to come in and just be physical. They're going to need that. And whoever it is that provides that, I think is going to have playing time. And so that, just looking through all the numbers, that was, to me, not a red flag, but just something that caught my attention, is that, like, outside of Caleb, and he's going to be adjusting to college basketball, there's not someone I would consider like a real instinctual, natural rebounder.
So I love the fact that you mentioned the goon thing. That's always been something. If I'm playing, fantasy GM, I would always have a 6'10" guy that's like 250 on my roster. And North Carolina's had him in the past. Roy Williams was good about having those guys that, everybody always say, well, why don't they play? I would always wonder, why wouldn't you just use him in games where teams were trying to get chippy with you? Let that player go in and get his 5 fouls. And I think Oakley did that better than most. Steven Adams has done it for a long time in the NBA with some other added benefits. But I would love to see North Carolina. We talked earlier about adding guys with the remaining scholarship this coming season. I'd love to see him find a guy like that just can come out, be in practice, and just be physical. Because when you've got a new group of players that are mostly versatile and sometimes, I hate to say this, finesse players, sometimes you got to get it up with them and kind of force that instinctive response and see how it goes. Because when the ACC season starts, I guarantee you there will be teams that have goons and that will not be afraid to body the North Carolina's post players up and see what happens. But to your point, Sherrell, and you didn't specifically say this, but I'll say it, North Carolina cannot have Seth Trimble be their leading rebounder next year. That is absolutely a recipe for disaster, and I think is not something that anybody listening to or watching this show wants to deal with. A couple more questions from the audience. I like this question from Keen the Fiend. Who do you think will be, player-wise, will be the unsung hero of the team? Sherrell, this has got a little bit of a ethos behind it, so I'm going to ask you, who do you think the Who do you think the unsung hero of the team might be? And you can define it however you'd like to, sir.
I'm laughing because I told y'all the answer to my question for every single one of these, who the answer was going to be. And I'm going to say Seth Trimble, just because, again, when you start to look at how the roster is put together, I think there are some question marks about how Bogavac will be as a defender at the 3, at 6'5". And I think it's fair to have some questions about the freshmen as well as Kai and Evans in the backcourt about how they will be defensively, either because of experience or because of size or foot speed or what have you. So that leaves Seth Trimble as someone who's going to every night have to probably play 25, 28 minutes of really intense defense on whoever the best, probably, I would say, perimeter player under 6'5" is on the opposing team. And so defense in general, I think, is kind of an unsung thing. And Trimble's going to have a lot on his plate. So for me, I know it seems cliche, but like I really think Seth Trimble is the key to this team. And it's not a points per game thing or a rebounds per game thing or what have you. It is, intangibles and leadership and defense and those type of things. And so his defense, I think, will be one of the unsung heroes if he takes it another step. Like he was okay as a freshman, good as a sophomore, really good to great at times as a junior. And now the ask I think the coaching staff has of him is to be great every game defensively. And he's capable, and now he just has to do it. So to me, that's the unsung part.
Sean, you got the same answer? You want to give a different name?
I'll go to Jonathan Powell just from an offensive perspective. In terms of unsung, I think his potential ability to light it up quickly or consistently will be important. And then if we're envisioning what a successful UNC team looks like, I think the people getting the accolades will be the bigs from Vasar and Caleb Wilson. Sherrell talked about Seth Trimble, but Kai and Evans, or even to an extent Derek Dixon, of what they're able to bring and that ball handling. I think some leadership from that perspective will be important, where they're not going to be the ones putting 20, most likely putting 20 points up, but if there can be steadiness, I think is the important part. And really the thing that will be everybody will be looking for from last year from that position. That to me would be the unsung hero, and that bringing that stability and IQ to the team and having that resonate across the starting lineup.
Love it, man. Appreciate you guys spending some time with that. So I would like to. I didn't mean to show that. Sorry. I mean, you're welcome, EC Keller, but I didn't mean to show that on the screen. Last question, and this is from Joseph in Durham. Sherrell, what is your favorite flavor of Powerade, and why is it red?
I don't drink Powerade, and I don't drink anything red. So
all right,
there you go.
Well,
there you go.
Good. Thanks for answering what the people want.
The blue Powerade is underrated. That's the only Powerade I would drink.
That might be the first time That might be the first time you and Sherrell have ever actually disagreed on this here show, and I am here for it. Something else, and I'm toying with making this a regular thing on the show, but I'm thinking about how do I make a segment about my AI, whose name is Larry, because I asked Larry to do some player comps, because I know Sean hates player comps, but I do think our listening and viewing audience likes player comps. So ran this through Larry, who is my AI. I'm going to give you the player comps he gave for all the incoming players. All right. So have fun with this. Again, this is just my AI talking. Some of it is rather funny. I'll share you the better inklings of it, and we'll see if this becomes this might, if this gets enough traction, maybe it becomes a regular thing and we have some fun with it. But Kai and Evans, the comp is Bobby Fraser from his early years meets Joel Barry Light. If he adds some aggression, Barry's tenacity in a Fraser chassis. Henry Vasar, comp Tyler Zeller with a Euro twist. Jaron Stevenson, comp Desmond Hubert with more offensive polish, hopefully. Jonathan Powell, comp Wayne Ellington without the resume yet. Keep in mind, this is all AI answering me. This is Larry, my AI bot, my virtual assistant. So this has not been approved by the panel on this here show. Jaden Young, comp Marcus Ginyard with a little less polish and more muscle. Luka Bogavac. Comp, Bruno Sundorf meets Reggie Bullock. Anybody that mentions Reggie Bullock is okay by me. And then I had him do the same thing for the freshmen. Again, love these. Caleb Wilson, comp, John Henson with more offense and young Harrison Barnes energy. I've noticed that Larry is very much up on the young player, the most recent modern era players. Derek Dixon, Larry Drew with Nate Britt's maturity. I don't even know what that means, but I love that that's what he came back with. And then Isaiah Dennis, comp, Jalik Felton meets Stillman White. Hear me out. Raw talent like Felton, but may not see heavy minutes early. Could be a reliable system guy like White if he buys in. All right. I'm done. I thought that was such a hilarious exercise that I had to share it here. And I hope you guys enjoyed that. If folks didn't absolutely hate it and Sherrell could pick up his eyeballs off the floor, maybe we'll dig it back up and dust it off next week.
I'm just kind of like, that's what's going to take my job in like 5 years. That is good. That's what we're doing.
Yep.
Wow.
The Bobby Fraser chassis part. I don't know if you've ever written a comms piece like that, but I loved it.
I'm pretty sure that's the first time in history Jalik Felton and Stillman White have been mentioned as a player comp for the same person. In the same thought ever in the history of the world. And it will never happen again. So
No.
Everybody who just watched Coast to Coast, they heard something that they will never be heard again in human history. So congratulations.
So shout out to Larry, my AI. Guys, I appreciate it. Shout out to everybody who made us a part of their evening tonight for getting good questions here. I love when y'all have good questions. The bad questions are the ones that make our jobs harder, but you guys had good questions tonight, and I appreciate that. Shout out to the folks on the message boards as well. Johnny T-Shirt for sponsoring, John Siegley for producing. We appreciate Sherrell McMillan and Sean Moran for always classing up the joint and making this a fun show for me to do. Until next time on the Coast to Coast podcast, I'm Joey Powell for Inside Carolina. We are your favorite podcast. Say hi to your mother for me.